At 18, Eli Marsh had $61, a canvas backpack, and a girl he would have followed anywhere. The girl's name was June, and she had $38. A sleeping bag rated to 40 degrees that they had been sharing since October, and a piece of paper she kept folded in the inside pocket of her coat that she had not shown him yet. She showed it to him on a Tuesday morning in a Birmingham bus station while they were eating vending machine crackers and trying to decide which direction made more sense than the others. The paper was a letter. It was from a solicitor's office in a town in England called Middlewich, and it was addressed to June Calloway, and it said that her great-uncle, one Arthur Calloway, had died in September, leaving an estate consisting primarily of a narrowboat registered on the Cheshire Canal system, that the boat had outstanding mooring fees, that the fees had gone to judgment, and that the county court had ordered the vessel sold to satisfy the debt. The letter said the auction had been scheduled. It said the starting bid was £1. It said, at the bottom, in a handwritten note beneath the solicitor's signature, he wanted you to have it. He spoke of you often. I thought you should know before the auction. P. Holt June had gotten the letter 6 weeks ago and had not known what to do with it. She had no passport. She had $48. She had Eli, who was looking at the letter now with the particular focus he brought to problems that seemed impossible. £1, he said. We don't have passports. We can get passports. We don't have June, he said. He looked up at her. When has not having something stopped us before? She looked at him for a moment. Then she looked at the letter. It took them 11 weeks. Eli worked construction day labor, and June worked double shifts at a diner in Irondale, and they slept in the bus station on the bad nights and in a shelter on the good ones, and they saved $2,200 and got their passports and bought the cheapest transatlantic flights they could find, which connected through Philadelphia and Dublin and landed in Manchester on a Wednesday morning in February, when the light was the color of old pewter and the air smelled like rain and exhaust and something underneath that neither of them could name yet. They took a train, then a bus. Then they walked 2 miles along a towpath with their backpacks on, and the canal on their left flat and gray and still, the bare hedgerows on the far bank reflected perfectly in the water. The boat was at the end of the mooring. She was 60 feet long and 7 feet wide, which is the width a narrowboat must be to fit the locks of the English canal system, and she had been painted dark green and red at some point in the past decade, though the green had gone dull and the red had gone to rust at the waterline and along the roof seam. The name on the bow was painted in yellow, Perseverance. The lettering was careful, the kind done by hand with a steady brush. One of the port windows had been boarded from the inside with a piece of plywood cut to fit. The stern deck had a wooden tiller arm and a hand-painted rose on the engine cover and a terracotta pot, empty, nailed to the stern rail. The boat was still floating. Eli noticed this first. He said it out loud. She's still floating, he said. Is that supposed to be impressive? For a boat that's been empty 3 years? Yes, they stood on the towpath and looked at her. On the opposite bank, a heron stood in the shallows and did not move. June took out the second key from the solicitor's packet. The first had been for the padlock on the mooring pin, and stepped carefully from the bank onto the stern deck. The boat shifted under her weight but steadily, the way a well-built thing moves when it takes on load. She unlocked the stern doors and pushed them open, and the smell came up the steps to meet them, cold and damp and old wood, and underneath it something that made June stop with one foot on the step. What? Eli said. Wood smoke, she said. Old wood smoke. Like it was lived in. She went down the steps. The interior was a single long space divided by function. a coal stove forward with a small sitting area, then a galley with a 2-burner propane stove and a Belfast sink, then a dinette, then a sleeping cabin aft with a fixed double berth and built-in storage underneath. Every surface was wood, painted panels in dark red and cream, worn smooth at the edges, the paint scuffed and layered in the way that accumulates over decades of use. On the shelf above the stove were 3 things: a brass barometer, a book of Canal maps with a cracked spine, and a mug with a painted narrowboat on it that still had a T-ring inside from the last time someone had used it. June picked up the mug and held it. Eli was already moving through the space the way he moved through any space he was assessing, hands on surfaces, testing for soft spots, opening and closing things. He ran a tap. Nothing. He checked the propane. Empty, but hookups intact. He opened the doors under the galley counter and found 2 full water containers and a spare propane canister and a box of ship's matches. He kept it stocked, Eli said. He thought someone was coming, June said. She was still holding the mug. They lit the stove with the ship's matches, and by the time the coal caught and the chimney started drawing, the windows had begun to fog from the inside, and the boat had changed from a cold, empty thing to something else, something harder to name. Eli made tea from a tin he found in the galley. June sat on the bench by the stove with her hands around the mug and looked at the painted panels and the barometer and the Canal maps and didn't say anything for a while. "We should check the hull," Eli said. "I know," June said. She didn't move. He gave her 5 more minutes. She didn't ask for them. He just gave them. The engine room was accessed through a hatch in the stern deck, just forward of the tiller. Eli went down with the flashlight and was quiet for a long time. When he came back up, he sat on the stern deck in the February cold and made a list on the back of the solicitor's letter: injectors, raw water pump, belts, 1 corroded battery terminal. Serious, but fixable. He'd worked construction equipment since he was 15, and diesel was diesel. He found a mooring manual in the port side storage locker. Inside the front cover, in a slanted handwriting that was clearly old and clearly practiced, "This boat has been on these canals for 41 years. She knows the way. Trust her." He showed it to June. "Did he write that?" she said. "Has to be." She read it again. "He wrote it for someone," she said, "not for himself." Eli looked at it. "He wrote it for us." She found it on the 3rd day. She had been working her way through the storage. Narrowboats have storage the way boats have to have storage, built into every available space, under berths and behind panels and above the gunwales. She had found spare parts and old charts and a tin of barley sugar sweets and a logbook of passages going back to 1987. Every lock noted, every mooring, every place the boat had been for 40 years. She was emptying the under-berth storage in the sleeping cabin, stacking things on the dinette to sort, when her hand found the panel at the very back, against the hull. The other panels had pull rings. This one had a padlock. It was a small padlock, the kind that looks decorative but isn't, brass and heavy. She looked at the key ring from the solicitor's packet. There were 3 keys on it. She'd used 2. The 3rd was small and brass. She sat cross-legged on the berth floor for a moment. She called Ely. He came back from the engine room with grease on his hands and looked at the padlock and looked at her. "You haven't opened it," he said. "I was waiting for you," she said. He sat down beside her on the floor. She put the key in the lock and turned it. The space behind the panel was approximately 2 feet deep and 3 feet wide, lined in cedar. She smelled it before she saw it, and dry in a way that nothing else on the boat was dry. He had built it carefully, sealed it against the hull damp, and lined it in cedar to protect against moisture and insects. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth and arranged with the precision of someone who had thought carefully about what would be found and by whom, were 4 things. The first was a journal. Thick, cloth-covered, the cloth green and worn at the corners. She could feel, without opening it, that it was full. The second was a folded leather wallet containing photographs. She put it aside to open with care. The third was a manila envelope, sealed, with legal written across the front in block letters. Inside, she opened it carefully, were 3 documents, the boat's title, showing a clear chain of ownership going back to 1981, with a transfer of ownership form already completed and signed in Arthur's hand, needing only her signature and a notary to be final. A building society passbook showing an account in Nantwich, with a balance of $22,341.07. And a letter from P. Holt at the solicitor's office, explaining the account, the title, and the fact that the mooring license had been paid forward for 3 years from Arthur's estate before the fees lapsed, meaning the judgment had been on the lapsed portion only, and the underlying mooring rights were intact. The fourth was a letter in a sealed envelope, her name on the front. June, she put it in her coat pocket. She opened the journal. The first entry was from 1983. Left Middlewich this morning. Took the Llangollen branch north. First solo passage. 14 locks. Hands are wrecked. Boat is fine. I am beginning to understand why people do this. Arthur Calloway had been a secondary school teacher in Middlewich for 31 years. He had bought the boat at 42 with money saved from summers he hadn't spent on anything else, and he had learned to handle it alone over the course of a decade of solo passages through the English Canal system, and the journal documented all of it. The locks, and the weather, and the mechanical crises, and the people he met at moorings, and the long stretches of nothing that he wrote about the way people write about things they have needed without knowing they needed them. But the journal was not only about the canal. In the margins, from the beginning, there were notes, small, sometimes in pencil, sometimes in a different ink as if they'd been added later. Crofton, widow, roof needed retiling. Did it over Easter weekend. Didn't tell her it was me. And then, a year later, Crofton sent a card to the school. Said a stranger had fixed her roof. I didn't say anything. A lockkeeper whose cottage flooded in 1991. A young boater with a failed engine he couldn't afford to repair. A family on a hire boat who'd run aground and lost their deposit. Each entry noting what Arthur had done in the same quiet accounting style, what was needed, what he provided. No commentary on whether it was noticed or thanked. June read for 3 hours. Eli read over her shoulder for the last hour, neither of them speaking. The mentions of her began in 2009. My brother David's girl is apparently in some difficulty in America. David won't say more than that. I've written twice, but he doesn't answer letters. He never answered letters. I've sent some money through a friend of a friend who knows someone in Birmingham. I don't know if it arrived. And later, heard June is 17 now. Nobody will tell me more. David is not a man who asks for help or permits it, which I understand but have never agreed with. And finally, toward the end of the journal, the handwriting slower, the pen pressed lighter. I've told Holt to find her when the time comes. I can't make David do anything, and I've stopped trying, but I can leave her the boat, and I can leave her the account, and I can leave her the 41 years I've spent learning these canals, and I can hope that someone who needs a way forward will recognize one when she sees it. June, if you're reading this, I'm sorry I couldn't find you sooner. I looked the ways I knew how to look. I should have learned more ways. June closed the journal. Outside, the canal was flat and gray, and a pair of mallards were making their way along the far bank in no hurry. The coal stove was ticking. Eli's hand was on her back. She looked out the port window for a while, and then she looked at the barometer and the mug on the shelf, and the canal maps with the cracked spine. She pressed the journal against her chest with both hands. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. She opened the leather wallet carefully. 20 photographs. She went through them slowly. Arthur as a young man, standing at the tiller of the Perseverance with the uncertain pride of someone who has just done a difficult thing for the first time. Arthur at a lock, working the windlass. Arthur at what must have been a canal festival, the boat decorated with flowers and bunting. A series of photographs from different seasons and different stretches of water, the boat always in them, always the same deep green. Toward the back, one photograph she was not expecting. Her father, young, much younger than she remembered him, standing on the stern of the Perseverance with his arm around a man who must be Arthur. They were both laughing at whatever the camera had caught them saying. Her father looked like someone she had never met. She held the photograph for a long time. "That's your dad?" Eli said quietly. "When he was happy," she said. She put it back carefully. There was a chandlery in the nearest town, 2 miles up the towpath. They walked it the next morning, early, before the light had fully arrived, with a list Eli had made of parts. The man behind the counter was named Terry, somewhere past 60, with the particular weathered competence of someone who had spent a lifetime around boats and did not need to advertise it. He looked at the list. He looked at them. "You're on the Perseverance," he said. "How did you know?" June said. "Arthur described you," he said. "Not you specifically. He said, a young woman and whoever she brings with her. They'll be in over their heads, but they'll be too stubborn to say so." He grinned. He had a way of describing people. You knew him, 20 years. He'd stop in every time he passed through. He looked at the list again. "The injector's on me," he said. "He helped me move my mother out of her house after her stroke in 2018. Came with his car and his hands and wouldn't leave until it was done. We argued about payment for a week and then I gave up. He put the injector in a separate bag and set it to the side. 'Welcome to the cut,' he said. 'That's what we call the canal.' The cut." He showed Eli how to test the raw water pump on a Wednesday afternoon in the chandlery's small workshop. June spent that Wednesday and the next 3 days reading the 41 years of canal maps in Arthur's logbook, learning the system, the locks and the staircase flights, and the tunnels and the winding holes where a 60-foot boat can turn. She made her own notes in a new notebook in the margins of her maps. The canal from Birmingham to the Welsh border. The Llangollen, which Arthur had called the most beautiful canal in England. The route south to London. The whole interconnected system of 2,000 miles that a boat like this one could travel for a lifetime without covering the same water twice. If you've made it this far into June and Eli's story, hit subscribe, because what happens next is the part I've been waiting to tell you. The letter from the Canal Trust arrived on a Friday. It was official. Canal and River Trust letterhead, formal language, 3 pages. The substance was this. A review of the mooring license had identified an irregularity in the original registration of the mooring site. The site, according to the Trust's records, had been classified as a temporary mooring, valid only for vessels actively cruising the network. A vessel in continuous occupation at a single mooring for more than 14 days in any calendar month was in violation of the licensing terms. The Trust was prepared to issue a breach notice unless the matter was resolved. A representative named Alderton had been assigned to the case. Alderton arrived the following Tuesday in a company Land Rover, in a fleece vest and lanyard, carrying a clipboard. He was polite. He was thorough. He had a lot of paperwork. The classification is clear, he said. The mooring is registered as a leisure cruising mooring. It's not a residential mooring. If you're living aboard continuously, you need a different license, and this site isn't registered for it. The mooring license was paid forward from Arthur Calloway's estate, June said. 3 years, continuous. Are you saying the estate paid 3 years of fees on an invalid license? Alderton looked at his clipboard. The payment was accepted, he said. Carefully. Then the trust accepted payment for a residential use mooring, June said, which would mean they recognized the classification was residential at the point of payment. She met his eyes. Or it was accepted in error, in which case the error is the trust's, not ours. Alderton wrote something on his clipboard and did not say anything. I'd also like to point out, June said, that the mooring agreement Arthur signed in 1983 predates the current licensing framework. That agreement is in the documents. She had spent the previous evening reading the document wallet 3 times. It includes a grandfather clause for continuous use moorings established before 1990. This mooring was established in 1981. Alderton looked at his clipboard for a long time. I'll need to refer this to the licensing department, he said. That's fine, she said. He left. He did not leave a business card. He left his clipboard by accident and she set it on the stern deck, and he came back for it 20 minutes later without making eye contact. She went inside and stood with her back against the galley counter for a moment. How did you know all that? Eli said. I read everything 3 times, she said. I always read everything 3 times. He looked at her. You've always done that. I learned it somewhere, she said. She pushed off the counter. Put the kettle on. That evening she opened Arthur's letter. She had been waiting for the right moment, the way she had been waiting to look at the photographs, the way she always gave herself time before the things she was most afraid to want. She made tea first. She sat at the dinette. She opened it carefully. Dear June, I've been trying to write this letter for 2 years, and I'm still not sure I've got it right. I'll send it anyway. I want you to know first that I know I am a stranger to you. I am your father's uncle, which makes me something like a great-uncle, which is not a relationship most people have strong feelings about. I don't know if you'll feel anything when you read this. I hope you feel something, because feeling something means you got the letter and found the boat. And that was the whole plan. I tried to reach you when you were younger, through David. Your father is a man who finds it very hard to accept help, and even harder to admit he needs it. And somewhere in that difficulty you got lost, and I am sorry for that. It wasn't your fault, and it wasn't entirely his either. He's a hard man to love, and I know that because I've been doing it for 67 years and I have managed it. Mostly, the boat is yours, because it's the best thing I have, and because a young woman who has had to figure everything out on her own deserves something that already knows where it's going. The canals go everywhere. You can live on this boat for the rest of your life and never run out of places to go. Or you can stay in one place for a long while and let the place settle around you. The boat will do either. That's what I've always loved about her. One thing, the people on the cut are good people. They'll help you before you ask, and they'll ask for nothing. When someone helps you, let them. And when you can help someone, do. That's the whole economy of the canal, and it has been working for 200 years. Go carefully through the locks. The canal knows the way. Your great-uncle, Arthur P.S. There's a tin of biscuits in the portside locker behind the engine manuals. I put them there in case you needed something sweet when you finished reading. They're digestives. I know that's not everyone's idea of something sweet, but it's mine, and it's my boat, so. She laughed. She hadn't been expecting to laugh. Eli looked at her. She handed him the letter. He read it and laughed too, at the same place. And then he found the tin exactly where Arthur had said it was, behind the engine manuals. And it was digestives, a full tin. Sealed in a tin that had kept them perfectly for however long it had been there. And they ate them at the dinette with their tea, while the coal stove burned and the canal held still outside the windows. Spring came in slowly. The engine ran for the first time on the last Saturday of March. Eli at the controls in the engine room, and June at the tiller. And when the propeller engaged and the boat shifted under its own power for the first time in 3 years, June let out a breath she felt like she'd been holding since Birmingham. They made their first passage on a Tuesday. 4 miles, 3 locks. The Perseverance moving through the countryside at 3 miles an hour, the way narrowboats move, which is to say, at the speed of thinking, and not the speed of going somewhere. Other boaters raised their hands as they passed. At the first lock, a man named Graham, who ran a hire boat business from the next mooring, came down to help with the gates without being asked, and talked to them through the entire process of the lock, with the particular calm of someone who has done it 10,000 times and still finds it worth explaining. "First lock?" he said. "First lock," June said. "You'll dream about them," he said. "Not bad dreams. Just, you'll dream about them." He was right. Terry from the chandlery gave them a name in June, a couple in their 20s, living on a boat 2 moorings down, who had run into trouble, a cracked engine block. No money for the repair, looking at the prospect of selling the boat to cover it. Terry said it with the specificity of someone who was not making a general comment. Eli spent a week sourcing a reconditioned engine block and another 3 days fitting it. He wouldn't take money. When they pressed him, he said what he had learned to say, that someone had helped them when they needed it, and this was how it traveled. They didn't push back. They brought a bottle of wine and a card and left them on the stern deck of the Perseverance. And didn't knock. June found the card the next morning. Inside, in handwriting she didn't recognize. From one Canal person to another. "Thank you." She put it on the shelf above the stove, between the barometer and the book of Canal maps. The girl appeared on the towpath on a morning in August. She was young, 17 or 18. With a duffel bag over one shoulder and a confused expression, and a phone in her hand that she kept looking at as if it had given her the wrong answer. She was standing at the stern of the Perseverance when June came up for the morning. "Are you June?" she said. Terry at the chandlery said, "He said you might know about living on a boat. I'm trying to figure out if it's something I could do." "How much do you know about boats?" June said. "Nothing," the girl said. "I know nothing about boats." June looked at her. She had a single duffel bag and a too light jacket even for August in England, and the posture of someone who had been finding their own way for long enough that it no longer felt remarkable. "What's your name?" June said. "Rosa," the girl said. "Come have tea," June said. "I'll show you the locks on the map, then we'll see what you think." Rosa looked at the boat, and then at June. Why? June thought about Arthur, who had never found her in time, who had set up the account and paid forward the mooring fees and put the digestives in the tin just in case, who had written, "I hope you feel something," because feeling something was the whole point. "Because someone tried to do this for me," June said. "From a long way away. I'm going to do it from close-up instead." She held the stern doors open, and Rosa went down the steps. Alderton from the Canal Trust came back in September. He came in his personal car. He had a bag from a bakery in town, and he set it on the stern deck without making a production of it. The 1983 agreement, he said. Legal reviewed it. "I know," June said. The grandfather clause is valid. He cleared his throat. The mooring is residential. It was always residential. The classification error was ours, not Arthur's. I know, June said again. He looked at the boat. He applied to have it corrected in 2014, he said quietly. There was a backlog. It never got processed. He was quiet for a moment. It got processed last month. He left without taking the bakery bag. Inside it were scones. She found what she'd been wondering about by accident. The way you find things when you've stopped looking for them. She was going through the logbook, the passage log with 40 years of entries, making notes for a chart she was drawing of the routes Arthur had covered most often, when a folded piece of paper fell out from between the pages. It was a receipt, a marina receipt, dated 2019. The boat listed was Blue Arrow. The owner listed was Graham, the same Graham from the first lock, who had talked them through it with a calm of 10,000 times. The notation at the bottom, in Arthur's handwriting, winter mooring fees, paid in full, anonymous, don't tell him. She sat with it in the galley for a moment. Then she folded it back into the logbook page, where it had been. That afternoon, Graham stopped by with a winding handle he'd found that looked like it might fit their fore-end locker, and she made him tea, and they talked about the Llangollen branch, which Arthur had always said was the most beautiful canal in England, and which June was planning to run in October. She didn't say anything about the receipt. They left for the Llangollen on a Saturday morning in October, when the light was low and amber and the trees along the towpath were just beginning to turn. Graham came out to see them off. Terry came out. The couple from 2 moorings down came out. Rosa, who had been living in the back cabin for 6 weeks, and who had turned out to be extraordinarily good at lock-wheeling, stood on the bow with the mooring rope coiled and ready, and looked like someone who knew exactly what she was doing, which was new for both of them. The Perseverance moved out of the mooring at 3 miles an hour. June stood at the tiller. Eli stood in the hatch to the engine room with his coffee. The canal opened up ahead of them, straight and still and silver in the morning light. The hedgerows on both banks reflected perfectly in the surface, the whole length of it going somewhere. She had $61 left in her wallet from the Birmingham bus station. The rest was in the Building Society account in Nantwich, and it was enough. She had 41 years of canal in the logbook in the cabin. She had her own notes in her own notebook. She had Eli and Rosa and the diesel and the coal and the mooring rope and the windlass and the maps. On the shelf in the cabin were the barometer, the canal maps with the cracked spine, the mug with the painted narrowboat, and the card from the couple 2 moorings down, and the digestive tin, empty now, cleaned out, repurposed as a tin for keeping spare keys and small coins and the things that matter enough to keep track of. The canal bent ahead of them around a slow curve. On the far bank, a heron stood in the shallows and did not move. June kept the tiller steady. She was 18 years old. The cut went on for 2,000 miles, and she hadn't seen any of it yet.